demographer, and Chairmans Hunter and Jones, Vice Chairman Rial and Hughes, and members of both committees. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. Let me start just by apologizing for for not being available at the June 2nd hearing. My colleague presented the testimony. We've given you a copy of the testimony that's been slightly revised in response to some of the questions that you all raised at that last hearing. In particular, there's a new page 12 and then pages 14 through 18 in that testimony, and we've tried to be responsive to some of the questions that you had. My purpose here today isn't really to provide comments, but really to be responsive to you all and see if you have any remaining questions, given that I wasn't available on the 2nd, and to communicate to you going forward that our office is available to you in a consultative fashion to provide data and information about population trends and projections, and provide you with any information that you need in the hard work that you have in drawing up new district lines. So with that, that's my comments, and I would take any questions that any members might have.
See your hand down here. Larry, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a question. Just in general, what I've seen from the State Demographer's Office, projection seem to be different than what the Census Bureau's projection. Can you just explain that to us? Why there might be a difference, and
sure.
Which one do you think's the best? And I guess you can tell.
I
don't have to guess on that.
The issue of projections is really that it is in some form an art, even though it's an educated art, and we try to essentially use the best information that we have. When we do projections, the part of the projections that is highly reliable, it has to do with natural increase. So that's births minus deaths, and then we apply those rates going forward. Generally speaking, those are fairly stable. The element that is variable is migration, and that's the thing that we, as demographers, really struggle to get a handle on. And so when we do the projections, we utilize different migration scenarios. And so that's, I think, represented, the projections are represented on page 11 of your handout there. And so you can see that we use different scenarios. The bottom line there, the dotted line, is where there's no migration, so that's just the natural increase, births minus deaths, and projecting that forward. The red line there being a very conservative migration scenario, and then the others are reflective of historical migration rates, and applying those to the population going forward. So that's the foundation and why there's some variation in our rates. The Census Bureau, we probably use similar things, but again, we do independent projections and do look at what the Census Bureau does and compares what we do to compare what we do to the Census Bureau. Other questions?
Representative Hildebrand.
I want to ask you on the migration, and so that's migration is for people moving to the state from somewhere else, principally the rest of the United States, or does that include foreign immigration?
For the projections, it would include both international and domestic migration. So these are just
do we have an idea what's bigger? I mean, are more people coming to Texas from the rest of the country, from California and others that are?
Yeah, if you go back to page 7.
Oh, 7.
On page 7, that gives you some sense about international migration is the blue line there,
Okay.
and the red line is domestic migration.
All
There are
right.
also some maps that show breakout domestic and international migration as well.
And do we have a demographic breakdown of both state and international migration?
When
I mean, do y'all have an estimate on what the demographic are?
I believe we could provide an estimate of that.
Right.
So, and when you say that, you're referring to race and ethnicity?
Yeah, I'm talking about the same stuff we have for the existing population and for our projections on how we've grown this decade. If migration is a part of that growth, we probably ought to have an idea of what the demographics are of that migration.
Yeah, so I believe we can provide, again, they're estimates, so they're not an actual count, but
This
we
is guidance
can.
until we get the real numbers next February.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
We have one more question, Representative Branch.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you and welcome. I understand you're relatively new as the state's demographer, so
I think
welcome back to
my commission started on June 4th, so it was actually, even though I've been playing the role, I played a demographer, now I'm really the demographer, June 4th.
Following Carl and Steve's great tradition, so welcome and thank you for your work, and I haven't had a chance to look at this. I wanted to refer you to, you said that there was a revised page 12.
Yes, sir.
And
That's not a revised page 12, that was an additional. So one of the questions I think that came forward was, one of the issues that came forward in the last testimony was, when might Texas exceed 25 million? And so this is breaking that out with the different projection scenarios.
thank you. Yeah, I recall some member, some wild member from North Texas asked that question. And to me, this is very helpful so that to make sure I understand it. Obviously, the no migration would be, that's, as you said, that's births and deaths, but that's only as probably as a contrast, because obviously there has been migration.
Correct, that's not a realistic scenario.
Right,
So,
okay. And then, is it your view that as a demographer making a projection that the migration scenario between 2000 and 2007, is that the best evidence of what migration has been from 2007
I think,
to
yes.
2010?
Yes, sir, I believe that's pretty close. Again, these are based on estimates of migration. So, but I believe that if we look at going up to 2009 or 2010, that the trend has probably been a little bit, it may even be a little bit higher than that, given what we saw in 2006 and 2007. So that might be a slight underestimate. And again, we won't know for certain until the census, but my sense is that might be a little bit lower than what actually happened. Now, the other part of that is we don't really know what's been happening with the economic downturn. Certainly we know that migration has declined a little bit, but it still is relatively high, but we don't have a real good handle on that.
Right. So you, at least the 2000 to 2004 and 2000 to 2007, I guess took, maybe it didn't hit Texas as much, but we did have a bit of a downturn in 2001 and the sort of post 9/11